welcome back to Dad's Watching Sports. It's Michael Draper here with you. We've got a special episode today. It's Monday, November 30th. If you have not yet checked out our episode 43 that we recorded on Sunday, the 29th, please check that out. We had a really great guest, Melissa Tomlinson, who is a mom, obviously, and then also is a high school football coach. And we talked about her mom life, being a high school football coach as a female, and then breaking barriers. We talked a lot about Sarah Fuller and what we saw at Vanderbilt over the past weekend, and it was really cool. So I very, very much encourage you to check out our latest episode of the show and listen to that interview with Melissa. It was really great to get her perspective on everything. But we are broadcasting live on the All Access Sports Network through their Facebook page and also the Dad's Watching Sports Facebook page and YouTube channel. We'd love for you to shoot us a comment. And if you're listening to the podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give us a rating and a review, as we would love to do that. But this is a special episode of the show. We have just tipped off the college basketball season, and there is no one better to talk college basketball with than our guest for today, and that is Kellogg of CBS Sports. Clark has been a analyst, both in-game and studio analyst for CBS Sports for really about the past 25 years or so. He also played basketball at Ohio State University, where he was all Big Ten and drafted by the Indiana Pacers and played for the Pacers. So, Clark, thank you so much for joining us on Dad's Watching Sports. How are you, sir?
I am good, Michael, and a pleasure to have a chance to hang out with you, man. A lot going on in the world in general and the sports world specifically, but much of it is good. Some of it is sobering and challenging, but I try to lean into the good that's all over the place. If we'll just take our time to look at it and look forward.
For sure. Well, we're definitely going to talk some college hoops because that's what I know you love and that's what I love. But before we get into that, this show is called Dad's Watching Sports for a reason. We also talk a lot about dad life and just about the ups and downs that come with that and all the fun stuff that comes along with being a dad. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that first. So tell us just a little bit about yourself and your family and just about how that's been a big part of your life.
Well, I tell you what, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm the oldest of five. My mom and dad are deceased now, but grew up in a really loving lower middle income class, predominantly black neighborhood on the east side of Cleveland. My dad was a police officer for over 40 years. Mom was a domestic engineer, I call her, because she stayed at home and took care of us until I was probably 8th or 9th grade. She started working part-time in a local hospital. So that's where it starts for me. I was fortunate, had all four of my grandparents alive until I was in my 30s. So got to know them really well, extended family all over Cleveland, aunts and uncles and cousins. So family for me has always been foundational and important and blessed and fun and challenging, all of that. And now I'm moving into the early third quarter of my life's journey. If you look at the scriptures, 70, anything beyond that, you're a bonus, although
absolutely
with technology and so forth, folks are living a lot longer. But I feel like I'm early in the third quarter. I've been married to my wife, Rosie, for 37 plus years. We got married back in the summer of '83.
That's great.
God has blessed us with 3 adults, a girl and 2 boys, 33, 31, and almost 29, and then 3 grandchildren. We've got 2 little grandgirls that are 4 and a grandson that's just about 8 months old now. So family is huge, and my kids are doing reasonably well. We're close to them, figuratively and literally, in that we're a close family. But to me, family is really the embodiment of what life is intended to be, and interdependence on one another, a leadership role for moms and dads, clearly seeking to nurture and grow your young children into productive, fruitful adults. And
yes.
with that comes tremendous blessing and joy and great challenges and speed bumps as well. But it gives you the fullness of life that God intends for us to have. It's rain and sunshine.
That's right.
It's part of the part of our growth journey. So I mean, it's the greatest privilege I've had is 1, being married, being a husband, and then 2 is being a dad. I mean, 1A. It's just it's a joy. And then grandfatherhood that club is a joy indescribable for those that are already there and those that hope to get there someday. It's a whole nother level. So
Oh, I'm sure.
nothing gets me more excited than thinking about, talking about, or being with the crew that God has blessed me to be part of. My wife and our
Absolutely.
children and their kids. Yeah.
And we talk about it on our show all the time. It's also the incredible responsibility, when you have children and then you're responsible for really guiding them, especially, people of faith too, of guiding them and what you hope that they kind of lead their life in this way. And so talk about that, just the responsibility, and then having to do that with such a prominent career, both playing in the NBA and then going into broadcasting. How have you been able to balance that work, life, family balance?
Praise to God. I became a Christian in 1986 before any of our children were born. I gave my life and heart to God through faith in Christ in November of 86, 34 years ago. And our first child was born in March of 87, our daughter, Talisa. So they didn't know much of my playing career other than what they've read and seen in videos and some of the memorabilia I have and what people have told them. But they certainly have known me as a Christ follower and as a dad who's attempted to follow the life giver. And so that's been really the foundation upon which I've tried to lead and love my wife and our children well. And certainly mistakes along the way, things I would redo if I had a chance. But I've always been foundation on trying to allow the scriptures to inform what I do in all of my roles, and certainly as a dad. And then the other part you mentioned too, which was always a real tussle and struggle for me because of my visibility, because of the prominence of my last name. It didn't start with me. My dad was really an outstanding three-sport athlete in Cleveland, and I would encounter folks that remembered him not only as a police officer, but as an athlete and as a really good guy, desiring to try to live up to that, and then sensing that with my own kids in a more magnified and amplified way, because I took things a step or two farther than my dad did in terms of my career as a player, and then as a still fairly visible and known public figure in broadcasting. So I've always been sensitive to that. And sometimes, Michael, I've pulled back too much from engagement with my kids because I didn't ever want to overwhelm them with the burden that they already carry because of their last name. And so there were times where I probably should have been more engaged and more forceful with some areas. But by and large, I trust that God will fill in the gaps that I've missed, and I try to make sure I don't have too many more going forward. But that's a hard thing, man. That sword of notoriety or celebrity, it cuts both ways.
I'm sure.
With the kids. I mean, even with me and my wife, some people want to kiss your feet in your ring because of who you are and who you've been in a sport. And other people want to try to pull you down for whatever reason. Many folks and most are really trying to receive you as you are. And so it's a challenge. And I always worried about that and prayed about that for my kids, that my wife and I, would clearly value them as individuals and seek to raise them as their own people in the fear and action of the Lord, and then be there as mom and dad, not as a public figure, to be there consistently with them, loving them, being a refuge for them, being an encouragement, a teacher, a supporter, and not always being their friend. Because
that's the tough part right there.
That's all. Yeah. It's not, friendship is not a high priority when you're raising your kids. To not embitter them is a high priority, and to model and demonstrate a life surrender to God is a high priority for those of us that are Christians. So that's how we attempted to navigate it. And it's still it's still work in progress, Michael, because parenting doesn't go away when your kids become adults. It just changes in terms of the dynamics of it.
For sure. Well, I've got a 4-year-old and an almost 2-year-old, so we were like right there in it, and everything.
So what about the genders of your kids?
4-year-old is a girl, and a 2-year-old is a boy.
Okay.
So we've got one of each, and they are They've got great personalities. They've got big personalities. Our 4-year-old, she asks every single question about every single thing, which is great.
That's what girls do.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. But they're so much fun, and we're so blessed to have them in our lives and to be able to be their parents. And, we talk about this on our show all the time. We're just trying not to screw up. We're just trying to do the best thing that we can do just to
don't try too hard because you're going to screw up regardless. You just want to try to make any catastrophic mistakes. And even those sometimes can work out for good under the authority and providence of God. But I understand. I hear you loud and clear. We all want to do what we feel is best and right for our kids. And sometimes we get it right. And sometimes we learn from getting it wrong.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, your playing career and your kids not being necessarily alive for a lot of that, but they obviously know, Dad played in the NBA. Do you guys sit down and throughout their life, have y'all watched games? I mean, are they big sports fans? Do they follow some of the same teams that you do? What has that been like?
We're a big time sports family, man. My wife played high school sports, loves not only sports, but loves all kinds of games. Okay. Card games, board games, my wife loves games, and I do too. So we're gamers, we're sports folks. All three of our kids play Division I sports at the college level. Our daughter was a volleyballer at Georgia Tech. Our boys, our oldest played a couple of years of basketball at Providence before giving it up. And then Nick, our youngest son, had a 4-year career at Ohio University, and just until recently had been playing overseas in Europe for the last 5 or 6 years. So we're a sports family. Our youngest son played soccer at a really high level, exposed me and my wife to that game, and I'm still a soccer fan. Saw the Columbus Crew advance to the Eastern Conference Finals last night.
They did. You knocked off my Nashville soccer club. I live in Nashville, so you guys knocked us off.
We needed extra time for it, but we got her done, and I'm excited about the future for the Crew. New stadium being built here in Columbus. So we're sports fans. We are football, basketball, soccer, volleyball. And our kids, we exposed them to it early, and they gravitated to it, had some aptitude, and had really good college careers, and got a good portion. Actually, our middle son gave up playing, but he's in medical school right now, and the two older ones, the two others played throughout their college careers, and are still involved in sports in some capacity. So yeah, we're big sports fans here.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like it. Well, the NBA draft was just a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this on our show about, what that's got to be like for a young man to hear his name called and knowing that day is coming. And even from our perspective of a parent to have your child kind of meet the epitome of what they've been striving for their whole life. From your perspective of someone who went through that, what was that moment like where you hear your name called, being selected by the Pacers with the number 8 overall pick, knowing that was probably your life's dream, at least in some capacity? What was that like?
Sheer joy and gratitude. And every year the draft rolls around, I'm excited as heck for those kids and those families because I've been there. It was 38 years ago for me. It was the summer of 82, but still that excitement, that culmination. My mom and dad had not flown much when I was going through the draft. Actually, they went on a couple of my college recruiting visits. We flew a couple of times there, but they had never really traveled much. My dad had, but my mom had never been on a plane. So visiting colleges before I chose Ohio State, and then they were there with me at the draft. My fiance at the time, wife-to-be Rosie, was there, my agent. I was the 8th pick. It's not nearly as amplified and dramatized, but still there's the element of joy and excitement and gratitude hearing your name called and being part of the NBA and realizing that dream you had. For me, it started at probably 9 or 10 years old, Michael, when I thought about wanting to one day be one of those pros that I was watching on TV and reading about, man. And I see it happen and to have it happen is just really special and gratifying. And I still get those feelings vicariously as I watch each draft, and I follow the NBA fairly closely.
Sure. Yeah, it's really great to see those families. I mean, that is for a lot of those families a transformational evening where their whole life's changing. I follow the University of Kentucky, and you think of somebody like Bam Adebayo, who this past week posted a picture of the trailer that he grew up in as a young child, and then just signed what could be a $200 million contract for his efforts. So it's really an amazing thing to see.
No doubt.
Those kids go through that. So well, let's talk some college hoops. After all, that's what you've kind of dedicated the rest of after your playing career life towards. Just kind of off the top, what are some of the biggest moments of your 25 years from a college basketball standpoint that just kind of stand out to you?
Well, the first one, and it's always going to be at the top of my list, I mentioned our youngest son, Nick, played at OU. They made a run to the Sweet 16 his sophomore year back in 2012. And for me, in all of my basketball journey, particularly as a broadcaster, nothing exceeds that. I mean, I wasn't able to go to his games, but I was able to keep track with my iPad, and CBS gave me a monitor for the Sweet 16 games because I was elsewhere broadcasting where I could watch him and cheer for the Bobcats. I mean, that still gives me goosebumps and great feelings of pride and joy to see him have a one shining moment in that program and those kids, and to know what that means to the countless of thousands of players over the years that have had an opportunity to experience that on whatever level. And so that goes to the top of the list. Calling my first championship game with Jim Nance and the rest of our crew, Tracy Wolfson and our broadcast producers and directors with our whole team, being able to be in that position and to do that. That was 2009, and to have 4 additional years of that. There have been so many games and players, man, in the studio or courtside. But my son's experience is at the top of the list. And probably second would be the opportunity in replacing Billy Packer, who was a legendary broadcaster, as Jim Nance's partner for 5 championship games from 2009 to 2013.
Absolutely. Well, you guys do a fantastic job. All right, so let's take you back to March 13th. They announced the NCAA tournament is canceled this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. What were you doing? What was your initial reaction? Just kind of take us back to that day.
Well, it was a slow cascading south because the night before, Rudy Gobert had tested positive for the coronavirus, and the NBA shut things down immediately. The next morning, which was Thursday, teams were ushered off the court as they were preparing for conference tournament championship games, wherever they were. Indianapolis comes to mind most readily because I was locking in. I think the Buckeyes may have been getting ready to play, or somebody, but I think the Buckeyes were scheduled for maybe a noon game that day. But anyway, I was teeing up my TV watching for the day, and then saw that the conference tournaments were canceled. Then it was just a matter of time before the inevitable of the NCAA tournament being canceled. And it rocked us all. I mean, and it wasn't even significant. It was significant, clearly, but it really hit me on Selection Sunday, which was only a few days later. As I was at home and started getting texts and calls from some of my colleagues and missing the people that are part of that whole 3 weeks of craziness and madness that we so love. And it was an empty feeling that created some real grief and mourning that surprised me. I mean, it emotionally brought me to tears. And it wasn't just the games, it was more the people and what was being lost for those players, those coaches, those fan bases, our group that really galvanizes and rallies around the privilege of bringing that event to the millions across the country and world. All of that cascaded on me on Sunday. And I was a wreck, man. I was absolutely an emotional wreck. And it caught me off guard because I had done reasonably well attempting to deal with the reality of where we were with the pandemic and what was needed to try to mitigate it. But when that rocked me, when that hit me Sunday and became even more real and amplified, I was in mourning for about a day and a half.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we were kind of all in that same boat. I mean, it just thinking back. I mean, you just never think that we're not going to have a major sporting event, specifically like March Madness, and to have that happen was just was just devastating. And we talked about it a lot on this show as, as fans and people who cover and watch sports, it's one thing. But for those kids that, again, kind of like the NBA, they work their entire lives to have that moment. And then unfortunately, to nobody's fault, but to have that taken away from them just had to be absolutely heartbreaking. Speaking of the NBA again, and I know you said you watch a lot of NBA. Did you watch the bubble, the playoffs?
Oh, yeah.
What'd you think about it?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Michael. Go ahead.
No, just go ahead. What'd you think about how they were able to pull all that off?
Man, it was absolutely amazing. Fantastic. It was tonic for our sports watching souls.
Yes.
And for our basketball loving folks. I mean, it was really, really a nice injection. And the way they pulled it off, just thinking about the people, the logistics, the effort, all of the things that went into that we won't know about other than talking to people that were in there and reading about it. But we experienced high level, the best players in the world competing for a championship in difficult times and circumstances, yet bringing what they are to all of us, which is high level, intense, competitive pro basketball. It was great. And we're big LeBron fans here. He's a Northeastern Ohio guy.
Right.
Brought a championship to Cleveland in 2016. And has just done so remarkably well, not only on the court, but in how he's handled just humongous expectations and celebrity throughout his career, man. I think it's going to be one of the great case studies in the history of sports when he's done what he's done, how he's done it, under the expectations and pressure that he's done it is more remarkable than we can even articulate right now, in my opinion. I just think it's unbelievable what he's done and continues to do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. The expectations that he had as a 17, 18-year-old, and the fact that he's been able to not only live up to those, but exceed those. And then, like you said, off the court, he's almost exceeded those expectations off the court.
And as a dad, I'm sure he's going to have. Just phenomenal. I mean, it's a fascinating journey to watch. So I was happy to see the Lakers and him get another one. And it'll be fun to kind of watch how this next season plays out and unfolds.
Yes, it will. Okay, so I got a hypothetical here for you. College basketball can have a full season and crown a champion if it does what?
Well, I think just navigate the road they're on, quite honestly. There's not much more. I think the idea and the likely reality that the tournament will take place in one site, it seems Indianapolis would be that area, which makes sense.
Sure.
And I think you work through the bumps and the hiccups that are inevitable, and we're seeing those in terms of game cancellations and virus spread on teams and so forth. But it's a really hard needle to thread, Michael. And I'm just thankful that we can thread it and do it reasonably safely and that there's light on the other side of this. The darkness is just going to linger for we don't know how long, but there is going to be light. And in the midst of the darkness, I think it's important to do the things we need to do to try to be safe and prudent and healthy, but also to try to move forward in terms of those things that we have to do or desire to do, as long as we can do them reasonably safely. So I don't think there's an ultimatum. I think you deal with the reality of where you are and the protocols that are in place, I think will lend itself to a season being completed and a tournament culminating that season with the crowning of a champion. And I'm hopeful that it'll be as scheduled in that same time frame that we typically are accustomed to, that first part of April. Yeah.
As are we all. We're talking with Clark Kellogg of CBS Sports. Clark, I've got just a couple more questions for you here, and then I'll let you go because I know we're right in the middle of it, so I know you're busy.
And I'm glad to be in the middle of it, quite honestly. Michael.
Absolutely.
To be fully immersed in watching games instead of just reading about teams and to see teams and discover these outstanding mid-major squads and these terrific and all over the country. I mean, that's the great joy I get, is to have every season unfold in a unique manner and discover some of these budding stars and surprise excellent teams.
That's right. Speaking of surprises, we've already had a couple of upsets in college basketball. San Francisco knocked off Virginia. Richmond beat Kentucky. because of the lack of the fans in the stands and the preparation practice time for teams and with teams having to take weeks off and things like that, do you anticipate we're going to see kind of madness all season long and see a lot more of these upsets?
I think we will, but I think we've been seeing that for the last 20 years, quite honestly. The gap is closed between the power conference teams and the non-power conference teams because there are so many more good players that are spread out. And the transfer portal certainly upgrades experience and talent on some of the non-power conference team rosters. So I think we've seen it. We may see a little more of it because of those things you mentioned, the pandemic as the backdrop, the lack of practice time, young teams not benefiting from preseason conditioning as in years past. So I think experienced teams that can stay healthy will have a slight advantage. And then no real home court advantage anywhere for the most part because of the lack of fans. So that too squeezes the gap between teams. When you think about the Big Ten environment, some of the SEC environments, you won't have that same type of advantage. So all of that, I think, will create maybe a little more disruptive madness as we move towards 2021 and March Madness in a few months.
Yeah, when you've got 2,300 fans in Rupp Arena as opposed to 23,000, that's a big difference. And so I think it's going to be great to see all that kind of play out. All right, last question for you here. Give me 7 or 8 teams that you feel like have a great shot at making the Final Four, wherever it is and whenever it is. But who do you think is kind of the favorites or teams that you think are going to make it there?
Well, I haven't seen anybody that's better than Gonzaga. I think most would agree with that. They've got a blend of experience and talent that's unique. I love Illinois, what they have in terms of size, athleticism. I think Kansas will be there. They're a little different than in the past, but I think Kansas will be in the mix. This Kentucky team, I watched that Richmond game yesterday, and I tell you, I don't know if I've seen a team as long and as bouncy and as live as Kentucky at multiple positions. They're young, so they'll need some time, but boy, they've got some really great potential there. So I wouldn't dismiss them. I certainly think Iowa would be in that group. And I like to always kind of go outside of your perennial powers. I love that Richmond team. And it's a shame they don't have Nick Sherrod. If they had him, oh my goodness. And St. Louis is another team. I know they've got a couple of their key guys that are hurt right now, but teams of that ilk, don't sleep on Dayton again. I know they lost Obi Toppin, but Anthony Grant has some nice ammunition. Baylor is clearly in that upper echelon with their backcourt. So I'll give you a couple. St. Louis, Richmond out of the A-10, Dayton. There was somebody else on my radar outside of the power conferences, and I just drawn a blank. And I gave you a handful of the usual suspects.
Sure.
That would be in the mix. But I'll be updating that list as we go. But those are some of the teams that I've kind of highlighted and put on my radar watch list.
Well, it's going to be fun nonetheless. We've got the Champions Classic tipping off on Tuesday night with all those 4 powerhouse programs, and then we just got great college basketball the rest of the way. But, Clark, thanks so much for taking the time. Again, I know it's a busy time, and I can't thank you enough for taking some time to chatting with us. And just best of luck in the season, and hope you stay healthy and stay having fun with it. And we look forward to watching all the great broadcasting that you guys do over at Turner and CBS.
I appreciate it, Michael. Great to be with you. You and your family stay safe and healthy. And I got another team I need to add to my list, Florida State, Leonard Hamilton and his group. Throw them in your hopper as to keep an eye on. But really enjoyed the conversation. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk again during the season.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Have a great day.
Yep, you do the same. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to go to a break here on Dad's Watching Sports for the next week, but we will be back, like I said. Again, make sure you check out episode 43 when we were joined by Melissa Tomlinson to talk about mom life, coaching high school football, the breaking the barriers, that all that's been going on here recently. And then stay tuned for next week's show as we're joined by the Bracketeers to break down the holiday song bracket. We'll see you next week on Dad's Watching Sports. Again, special thanks to Clark Kellogg. Y'all have a great week.